I'm surprised the New York Times said, how were you, from LA or in Las Vegas?
I was in Las Vegas supporting presidential candidates because they were campaigning out there, and I saw the event and I wanted to come down and talk to folks.
Cool.
Are you in the area?
What's that? I'm from Oakland myself.
Okay. Are you? What's happening here? I'm trying to make sure I have all.
I do live streaming for Frontline America.
Okay.
It's a Ben Berkham is the host or the. And so what I do is do production assistance for him, producer, some minor editing. We brought on some good, better editor. And
what made you all want to come out to?
Well, I support Marco Gutierrez in the Bay Area. I was concerned that the project was overambitious, the event was overambitious. And so I wanted to make sure that people weren't put in situations where it might appear that this was an event of that difficult to, if Marco came out here and it turned out to be an event of bad faith, a setup if you will, then hopefully my experience and age would be able to identify this stuff, as opposed to being overambitious. A setup, we're from the Bay Area, right? For example, UC Berkeley gets burnt to the ground, whatever, not burnt to the ground, but the new KKK called Antifa, all right, they come, and a communist group, that nobody calls them communists for some reason, come into UC Berkeley to try to shut down a gay comedian who has a black boyfriend, apparently, Milo Yiannopoulos. They use Molotov cocktails, which is a signature for communism. Now, Antifa, they say there's anti-fascist, so it's anti-communism. I'm sorry, so it was the communists and Stalin. Stalin and Hitler had the Pact of Non-Aggression. This is because the Molotov cocktail matters. And so they had the Pact of Non-Aggression. Stalin or Hitler stabbed Stalin in the back, and ever since then, Antifa rose up and have been heartbroken ever since. They're all totalitarians. Antifa, if you put them in the frame of not anti-fascist, anti-foe, add in a parentheses UX at the end, because it's totalitarian communism. And so, by New York Times putting a plausible, calling them anti-fascist, is bad faith journalism. Because without the obvious knowledge that I'm telling you, and the use of the Molotov cocktail, and their link to communism, so this dovetails. So in the Bay Area, we have Barbara Lee or Nancy Pelosi. They have every head of government incentivizing and encouraging domestic terrorism against people who just want to defend the Constitution. And they label them white nationalists or white supremacists. There's no such thing as a white supremacist. You know, there might be, just like there's no such thing as a unicorn. There might be people who dress up in a costume that looks like a unicorn, but that doesn't make them a unicorn. I don't believe in a neo-Nazi. I don't believe in white supremacy, because even the word talks past the sale. So anybody who says white supremacy is a bad faith, is using it in bad faith. There's no such thing. It's just we're people. We're the Americans. So people who use white supremacy use it in a term of bad faith to control a conversation, as opposed to, say, people who are pretending that, see, they don't even pretend that you infect an election with demographics. First of all, they made it seem like people who supported President Trump were not college, or they made it seem that like the college graduates were more wise. You know, the college educated support Hillary Clinton, and so that implied that the people who were voting for Trump were elitist. Right. And so all of a sudden now you set up the Zimbardo prison experiment, where you have people who consider themselves elite now doing whatever that they want to the people who are randomly consider themselves not elite, and all of a sudden you have, in the Zimbardo prison experiment in Stanford, the area I grew up in, within 6 days they had the people crawling on the ground, similar to what we're doing now with patriots, people who are defending the Constitution, because people who believe themselves elite, people who live in dense urban environments, because oftentimes trends start there, the fashions designed there up to a year or two in advance, music, could be up to 3 to 5 years in advance, from the time it becomes popular, that we find ourselves, because I lived in San Francisco and I enjoyed what I thought the pinnacle of human history pre-Bill Clinton's Y2K hoax, because we sat around the table and we were equals, no matter what it was. In San Francisco, at least, of what I saw. In New York, I went out there, even during the Puerto Rico break, it was just we competed in good faith and we treated nationalities as sports teams. So no more hostility than the Niners would have against the LA Rams. It'd be a temporary, rah, 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 and then after the game you go and have a beer. But the party that supported plantation politics, the Democrat Party, throughout their history, the ones who enslaved people, and then they invent a story where they somehow made some secret agreement with the GOP to turn into some political, like, oh, we decided to become the racist and we were supporting. No, what they did was they gave power. What happened was in 1959-1960 campaign, Robert Kennedy told John Kennedy, he said, hey, we can get Martin Luther King out of jail. It wasn't Birmingham jail, it was I think it was Selma or some other jail he was imprisoned in. Okay? Martin Luther King was Republican, but there was the good old boy down there. The good old boy network was Democrat. So Robert F. Kennedy told John F. Kennedy, said, hey, if we make some phone calls, maybe we can get him released and we can use that to our political advantage. That was the arm wrestle that was won. And so then Martin Luther King or his supporters were beholden to the good old boy network because they got him out. If you research that, CNN has a good special on this, actually, of all people. And so weaponizing American history against defending the Constitution, and that should be the litmus test instead of left and right, because when left and right collude, you get corruption, and that's where we're at right now, or the swamp, or whatever. And so it's not Republican, Democrat. It's the people who weaponize luring disadvantaged across a border, so that they have to, more likely than not, have to beholden themselves to coyotes for $2,000 per person that they probably have to send back to their families. The coyotes go and establish a link, and they probably take half or all of it. I don't know, but
President Trump
okay.
is someone who thinks like is President Trump, you think, recognize the real problems in Iceland?
I think he did because of his. If you study how he treated Mar-a-Lago, he used trolling, what they call trolling now, but punking, basically showing guess who's coming to dinner, Sidney Poitier, when he forced the community to accept blacks and Jews into his resort. So using that as the litmus, or as a flagstone or milestone, if you will, or what was it, a mark? Flag in the sand. So
Indicator,
right, indicator, pre-election. See, the thing is, it's only fair in this environment to digest information pre-announcement, because once he descended down that stairs, it polarized people right away because of the speech, and it did to me too. It's like, I always assumed that he was a man wasn't from Manhattan, who was essentially the Great Gatsby, if you will, but succeeded because instead of Gothic architecture, he wanted modern architecture, the mirrors, the brasses, and all that stuff, right? And so that he has always been at odds with the Manhattan elite, and that dovetailed into. I didn't know this. I just assumed it at the time, watching him from afar, from across the coast, and just hearing the stories as they filtered, and he was kind of like the bad boy of New York. The Rolling Stones article is a very, very good article, probably the last good piece of journalism in the election season about him and his family. But unfortunately, what they did is, instead of saying, can you imagine Carly Fiorina being president, they focused on that, basically apparently misogynistic comment. No, it's about dowdiness. It's about not inspiring people, and it's about her questionable leadership at HP and that type of stuff. So, but they condensed it down to a comment about Go ahead.
Mark, my friend, was telling me how he was really following along with the birther, with the Obama, Trump going back and forth. Was that the thing that you follow?
Well, I follow it to the extent that what happened in 2008? The press didn't ask those questions. The birther stuff, there's no reason for the birther stuff to exist in 2012, 2010 era. All those questions should have been covered by the press. I consider it to be a complete collapse and comatose press function because now they're media. New York Times is entertainment, not. You might be trying to do the right thing. I don't know. We'll see what your work looks like. But my point is the birther thing is each one of these people are individuals, and they're influenced. They're just cocoons of information. Mark can sound lucid, and all of a sudden he's talking about what's that crap? Contrails. You know, heavy metals being suspended and all this stuff. And so then I tried to. There was a guy named. There was a radio talk show guy named Ron something from the Bay Area. But what he would do is he would take calls, and no matter who the caller was, he would step through reasonable and step it back, and then he would give them respect of what they said, and he would counter what their adversarial stuff, but it always seemed like he was treating them with respect, no matter how crazy their UFO and all that stuff. You know, he would say, hey, you know, he would question them on some of the physics or something like that. So, for example, when he was talking about the contrails, I'm like going, just the wear and tear on the engines or something, you know, like, I'm trying to seed it in something where it would question. I don't know what grabs. I guess when you lose confidence in the press, you do what you can, and then all of a sudden there's all this other entertainment stuff that try to grab people and run. Birthers. Now, my point is the birther operates on the same thing. Okay. The failure of the press was that why didn't we ask these questions of President or candidate Obama? Why didn't we know that Barack Obama's father was the actual economic minister of Kenya? Did you know that? He was in the government of Kenya. I didn't know that until recently. Because what I did was after I didn't like that he was with Acorn, that he was a national trainer. I felt that their community organizing eroded confidence in our banking system because of using guilt to defeat the redlining and all the ills of the banking system. But I didn't think they did it above board. And so I was really concerned about that. I tried to, but on his inauguration day, I read the letter to my daughters. And so I'm like, oh, you know, he's my president. I'm going to support him, but I'm still going to look at him adversarially. And so I couldn't verify anything about him. I couldn't find a syllabus. He wasn't a constitutional professor. He was what they call now a senior lecturer. So those huge gaps of failure, because we wanted we needed and wanted a Jackie Robinson, we got a sophist. We got somebody who spoke soaring rhetoric, but whose community organizing was detrimental and not supportive of the U.S. Constitution. He didn't defend the United States. He apologized for us, and to the rest of the world that should be apologizing to the United States. You know, that's how I see it. George Bush.
So in some ways, when Trump was asking those questions, those were the same questions that you were asking.
It was what he's able to do is he's able to think of things and distill them down to selling points, as opposed to. But yes, it was cognizant that I'm not saying it's racist to it. It's just like, where was the press when we needed them to answer? Bottom line, because McCain, Romney was the second, so McCain had those questions asked. His father, he was born on a naval base somewhere else, or military base somewhere else, and so it's like we became afraid to ask to be the press to candidate Obama because we wanted so much for it to be true. It's the emperor with new clothes. Unfortunately, because the soaring rhetoric, but outside of a teleprompter, he didn't seem he was good faith. And he didn't appear even to this day. So I'm an electrical engineer. So what I did was I went to the district in Marin County in California where they had the highest fundraising, assuming normal graft and corruption of the government, and somehow Marin County would become would enrich themselves. So I went and tried to do some of the financial. I had a real estate sales license, which allows you to do mortgage broker. I parked my license with a real estate broker, and then I happen to have some experience in antiviruses and before this time, and I gave away a free evaluation of a personal computer to establish a trusted advisor. And so, hey, by the way, if you do need a home loan or something like that, call me. That was my marketing campaign. Well, one of the clients that I had was denied a public defender because the judge assumed he had money squirreled away, but still denied him his right to a public defender. I said, then that's not how it's supposed to work. It's that you get the public defender and then you charge the defendant, and or whatever the rules are. But what happens in Marin County, they want to humiliate this guy, and I didn't believe it. So I went and watched one of the hearings.
When is this?
This is in Marin County. So 2008, 2009. Well, because I didn't move to Marin until Obama was elected, and the reason was I read the letter to my daughter, and that's why I still want to be a patriot, support the president, but hold him accountable. At the same time, I'm an engineer, so I'm thinking 3 or 4 steps ahead. How can I use free enterprise, or how can I benefit financially? Unfortunately, you say that now, it's a bad thing. Back then, I thought I was being clever.
So you moved
because I assumed that the county that gave him the most money in his presidential campaign per capita or whatever, I can't remember how I looked it up, but was Marin County. So it just seemed like, it's like in Texas, if George Bush got elected, you go to his home county or tech state, you'd assume, you would assume that the gas industry would, you wouldn't expect that from a Trump, but you would expect it from Bush type of stuff, so it would just make sense.
That's why you would expect it from Trump.
Because he was from New York, and it wasn't necessarily, he wants clean air and water. Because I'm talking about 2008. Okay.
Yeah, we can go back to
yeah. Well, no, I'm saying the mindset of 2008 was more environmental as opposed to a pipeline, which is the most efficient and safest way to recycle long decomposed plants. So oil is not bad. It's hydrocarbons that have been decomposed as algae, more likely than not, or whatever. Not trees and cute little flowers. It's most likely algae that was, so they have this toxic substance. The way to introduce those molecules back in the environment is to recycle them by combustion, and so that's never being portrayed. So using my engineering perspective is very frustrating from a journalist, because I don't know how there's no elevator pitch from our different stories. And so what I try to do is, in an environment like this, look out make sure participants are in good faith. The organizer might have wanted local credibility, and so over-advertised it. She basically pulled the Trump, oversold the event, 40 acres and all this other stuff. I'm going, first of all, you start with the barbecue with your friends. Then you may do a block party. Then you do something like this at a pizza party, Chamber of Commerce event. Then you do a county event. She wanted to do a national event where all of a sudden it's TrumpStock and use his name, and the whole thing just seemed bad faith, but because she wanted to be credible on the national scene instantly, to ride the wave of all the social media stuff. So,
but you came.
Well, I came because Marco came here. I came here a month ago, and to check out the venue, and I wasn't convinced. And I tried to help her, saying that at the county fair, instead of having 3 different band sites and all this other stuff, let's condense it down to if you go and look at the county site, there's one big building, like a high school auditorium. Let's do it like that, inside in case it rains, blah, blah, blah. And she wanted the grandiose plans, and it sounded like someone needed to keep an eye on the event, because people in good faith would come to the event. And for example, Newsweek. Do you see their headline? Revenge porn candidate comes to speak. I've never even heard of this dude before. I mean, I have heard of him on the national. Craig Brittain. I've never heard of him as a speaker here. I don't even think anybody here knows of him. But that's that type of. Even if he was.
He's listed. I don't know.
Well, even right, exactly. And someone like that seems to me almost placed to be poisonous. You know, if I were to if I wanted to take down the civil rights movement in the 1960s, I would hire a plantation foreman to go in and do the damage that the plantation foreman did by giving him special access and stuff. And so these these guys who do this weird crap, they sound like that. Like you in the Berkeley, because I went to the Berkeley. A lot of us, well, Marco and I met during the Berkeley riots, or the battle for Berkeley, where the communism came. You had people in black hoods, literally, or face masks, but black hoods coming into Berkeley, and the press, New York Times, all those people painted them as the good guys, throwing Molotov cocktails at the university. And so patriots, like, you ever see this movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Okay, well, I'm trying to find cultural analogies. Basically, no, but what you have to understand is that February 4th, we saw this school getting attacked. So a bunch of people who didn't know each other attack us. And so we went into the Civil Rights Park and said, attack us. You know, so we drew fire. It was a beautiful, heroic thing. We didn't know each other, but Americans came together and said, attack us. And then it was so cleverly planned, they labeled everybody who showed up white supremacy, even though, you know, it was America that showed up in the same proportions. Maybe less so because in the dense areas, it's harder to get the people who choose to live a harder lifestyle in rural communities to come to these events. And I don't like to talk about skin color. It's just people who choose to live easier lives, live in urban environments. The people who live harder lives are the people who live in deserts and in huts. This is a hard life out here, right? I mean, relatively. So in any case, how can I condense what? Well, because it's 2 years of bad faith journalism, or not journalism, essayists, trying to pigeonhole something that doesn't exist called white supremacy. It's just we're humans. It's just so when a patriot hears white supremacy, we're like, we automatically it loses. It's not they don't hear it. It's just that bad faith. It's like we're Americans. We defend the Constitution. We want a level playing field, and we want merit based to succeed. You know, so my mother's from. My sister was born in Tokyo. I was more likely than not either conceived on Tokyo or as soon as they got to Fort Carson in Colorado Springs. I was born in Colorado Springs, 1964. My dad was in the military, and I'm labeled a fascist in Berkeley. You know, they put up posters, wanted posters, essentially, of Guy Decker. You see of Kyle Chapman. You know So for Kyle Chapman, for example, because it's so cleverly designed that once you label the white supremacy thing and once everything's talking about dividing demographics, somebody who came there for anti-communist or knew what Antifa was, all of a sudden they start publishing stories of South Africa and white farmers getting. It's easy to corral that livestock into defending white nationalism, and so I just felt that was disingenuous. But go ahead.
When we look ahead to next year's election,
well, okay, so hold on. So because we're failing them, yes, that's why. It's because we're not willing to tell the truth. You're not willing to spend the time to risk your career to say, well, Berkeley actually was a group of patriots who came in to draw fire and put themselves in harm's way. We had people who came with medic supplies and stuff, and because we didn't want the university. I mean, it's such a beautiful story to be attacked anymore. We didn't want the students to be attacked. And instead, we were labeled white supremacists, and everybody ran with it instead of talking to people. And then it was cleverly designed. Why? Because they granted access to the media for 8 years. They labeled whatever happened to the Fox News feud. See, right? I have a friend who was Fox News host. San Francisco wouldn't let Fox News in San Francisco. I'm a civil libertarian, or I defend the Constitution, the good and bad parts. One of the graphs I want to tell you, totalitarian, so you have fascism and communism up at the top. Then you have the left and the right. I consider below this line, good faith. Above the line, totalitarianism, bad faith. So I I want the dialogue. I want the pendulum to swing back and forth. What happened was it swung to the left, they grabbed it and pulled it up. And then they used that propaganda because we were too afraid. Well, I think it was they were humiliated by 2001, covering the wrong stuff or blessing a war that that we were afraid to question why Sunnis and Shia have fought since the inception of their political system. It's not a religion. Islam's not a religion. It's a political system. They've intentionally set two political factions against each other called Sunni and Shia, and then they've been fighting and killing each other ever since. And then it's almost you took the art of war and tried to make a religious text of it. That's how I see it. And so you do stuff that's over the top. You chop off heads to get the media. So so you have domestic terrorism, then international terrorism, and then so when you say Islamophobia, it's not. It's do they defend? Does the political system of Islam support and defend the United States Constitution? No, it doesn't. I've never seen a defender of the because the equal rights of religion. You see in there in the effective practice of it, not the theoretical, but the effective practice is what they say: submission, peace by submission. That's not peace. That's slave. That's living your life. That's communism, essentially, fascism or whatever, totalitarianism. And so when somebody tries to instantiate that as a religion, I've met Muslims that are good. That's a religion to me, and I think that's a beautiful thing. What I don't like is the political systems that kill each other and will whatever their cause, and they won't call each other out. So my point is when Glenn Beck was on Fox News and he had an afternoon show and he's educating everybody on what a caliphate is and loony, and I'm like, huh. So I learned about this stuff. It stuck in my head, and he was a prophet when it came to this type of stuff. Prophetic, Nostradamus prophet, not religious prophet. Again, that's how anxiety-ridden patriots have become, where even the mention of a prophet, I have to couch as being Nostradamus. He was what do they call it now? Foretelling the future. But if I say prophet, it's religious and all this other stuff. So we patriots. Decker, or Taiho, T-A-I-H-O, Decker. Guy Taiho Decker. Guy Decker is what you'll see me on the Antifa. It seems like whenever there's Guy Taiho. I go by Taiho. Just put Taiho Decker, and then everything else will fall out. And when you have a question, Taiho, T-A-I-H-O.
What's the setup we've got?
Well, what I do is What I would do is I would hold you accountable, or mainstream media. If Univision showed up, I would look for leading questions that would to try to denigrate. I do the press function on the media, and they get upset. I'm doing my job. If I'm doing my job, you're my subject, and they don't want to be held. They don't want who edits your story such that the journalism that you might do as a good reporter gets chopped up into white nationalists. Although the revenge porn candidate didn't show white nationalists, blah, 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 where it's just...
I'm sorry, cut you off as you were spelling.
T-A-I-H-O, just H-O, Decker, because you'll be able to find my Facebook, and then @Ty Decker is on my Twitter, and 55 soon, 54 now, but 55 this week. What? I live in Oakland. I'm from the Bay Area. What's that?
Do you drive?
No, we carpool. Yeah. So.
With Marco?
Yeah, with Marco. So, Mark and I have had. They call it infighting, but it's not infighting. It's rabble. It's being American. It's being a constitutional convention. Every one of these people who attended that all had different ideas, and it's not like the Democrat Party today that if you step out of line, they'll lose the funding or whatever it's causing them to. Not question corruption when it's on your side, and that's what happened last time. Is that, for example, it's President Obama, former President Obama. I still try to use President Obama, or I'll call him President Professor Fraud Obama, because I still want to give him the title of respect, our former president, but his whole MO was fraud, meaning that it was, he said one thing,